Welcome to the Freelance Drive. Here we talk with skilled freelancers about their professional journey. Stay tuned for real life experiences to learn and actionable steps to take to improve your freelancing career. And my name is Yuri. I'm a community builder at Code Control and 9am.works. And my guest is Victoria Cumberbatch, a passionate facilitator, community developer, and leadership advisor with a wealth of experience in orchestrating spaces that promote self-discovery as ways to elevate and design your life. So, welcome, Viki.
Thank you, Yuri. That was fabulous. I love that intro.
It's just because you're fabulous.
I'll
And
take it.
let's jump to this right away, to this conversation. You are the best person I've ever known who is holding conversations. And I would say not most likely every conversation, but definitely difficult conversation. And you even had a project called Anderson Street, where you had those difficult discussions with people who had varying opinions on things. So for you, what is the definition of a difficult conversation?
Okay, a good one. Let's start at the start. So for me, it's a conversation in which there is actually no echo chamber. So I don't know if you use this metaphor of having an echo chamber, right? So like all the people that are around you in your world basically are mirrors for what you believe. So it's really difficult to test or have any critical thinking when everyone in your chamber is just like you. So for me, it's where two people have two different points of view on what is the truth. To me, that's the succinct definition of what a difficult conversation ends up being.
Is it like such different opinions that people can really fight on it?
Absolutely. Because I mean, shoot, we could completely have a dissenting discourse about the best computer, right? Or the best monitor to use, or the best this, or whatever, how to raise kids, of course.
Yeah.
So what is making up what you believe to be true is such a wide variety of experiences, beliefs, stories, the way you were brought up, who you've been around, what you've seen in your day-to-day life, right? Like Yuri, you and I have had such completely differing upbringings, lifestyles, a set of experiences, even what you have seen just in the past few years versus what I've seen in the past few years. So even that alone causes such a wide gap of what is and what if the truth, or what if what is a accumulation of all of what we have to say.
And some people are so afraid of having, okay, I'm not talking about even difficult conversation, about this conversation that you were talking about. Sometimes they are afraid of asking somebody to pass them thoughts.
Sure.
So when did you start having difficult conversations?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely early on with my parents. I'm an only child. And so it was a pretty democratic household. I always had a say at the table, like at the adults table, let's say, right? I think that's a definite stereotype of only children. We end up being with the adults at like 3 years old. And I can remember constantly asking my parents, who they were older than most of my friends' parents. So they were, they were closer to 40 than a lot of my friends' parents were like in their early 30s. So I'm asking, why are we here? Like, what's the point of life? What is the truth when there's perspective involved? Like I very distinctly remember asking them these like loaded ass questions, and or having something social happen at school and coming home and being like, so-and-so said this, then I said this, and the teacher said this. So like, what's right? The questions of right and wrong. Like, so basically the point is there was no one answer to any of the questions I used to ask. And then I guess over time, like that was kind of training wheels. And then I'm going to go out on a limb and say more women have potentially had these experiences, but as a woman and as a girl, I would get into such really close friendships, groups of girls, the vibe, like mean girls, just like the all the stereotypes. And I went through quite a few friendship divorces as it, and like is really actually a term. So being pulled in to mediate friend conversations, or me having to not ghost on someone, but say, I don't think our friendship is working anymore. Like that's hard, right? It's like not even romantic. It's a completely different level to deal with. And then over time, it was like I would be asked at jobs to lead town halls, hard conversations. I can think of 3 off the top of my head that were easily the hardest conversations I've ever led in my life. Having to deal with culture, having to deal with race, having to deal with ethnicity, like hard. And then I just got better over time from practice. That's really how it ended up being.
Is it even possible to have a win-win situation as a result of such a conversation?
Yes. Depends on what you define as win. So I'm definitely learning that as I'm getting older, there is no one way, right? So if you determine, Yuri, that a win is, I have succeeded, I went beyond what I thought I could do and say and be, I beat so-and-so out of the running, then no, is the answer to that question. If you believe that winning includes any semblance of learning, I learned something about myself, I learned something about this situation, I actually thought critically, the person I was speaking with made a great point, and now I no longer know if I believe what I believe anymore, that can be a win. So for me, that's my win or learn. I'm winning, I'm losing, I'm learning, I'm doing all of it, and it's constantly in a cycle. So I think, yes, hard conversations are always win-win from my perspective.
Yeah, and I would say that from my point of view, like win is when you make people's lives better and your for sure. So when at the end of the conversation, it's not like, somebody like a real winner who have this trophy and like, all the star, but that you understand what other people wanted, and at the end of the day you are together, working. If you had a challenge, if you had something to deal with, that now we are not like fighting with each other, but just working together in maybe in a different directions, you never know, but at least you have some kind of compromise or some kind of result, and you know how to move forward.
1,000%. I agree entirely. And that just to me, what you're not saying that I'm picking up is that what you value includes connection, collaboration, creativity, communication. Those are things I value as well. So, it ends up branching out, like this conversation branches out into a much bigger one of like, well, what do you value? And then also, how do you define certain things? What is success for you? What is winning for you, right? We've been raised, and wherever we've been raised in our society, to believe that the societal definition is the one. But what if it's not? What if it's not is really the question.
Sometimes I love when people are fighting about something, but they are really talking about the same thing, but with different words. It's so crazy.
Yeah, those are people that view winning as it has to be like this.
Yeah.
What if it was like this?
From your perspective, what skills a person has to have to handle a tough conversation?
Skills. Okay. I would say, well, I'm going to say skills and like things that they can do. I don't know if these are all skills, but definitely being honest. Mm-hmm. So honest as in not just truth telling, but etymologically it means to honor oneself. So if I'm honoring myself and what my truth is, that's what I'm going to say. Being direct, being clear, those are not the same thing. I think something else that like these other things assist, and they're not just skills. Reading Nonviolent Communication, the book, or watching, the TED Talk. I'm sure there's one. Maybe giving the other person a preface, like if you anticipate that this hard conversation is going to be imminent, what would you want? Well, I would want to know, okay, it sounds like so-and-so has something they want to talk to me about. Am I going to get fired? Is my friendship going to end? Am I going to be broken up with? What are these things? And I'm just saying a preface where you could say, hey, I'd like to chat with you for 20 minutes when you have time. Let me know when you have like the mental and emotional capacity. It's going to be a little bit more serious, but we're going to talk about these things. I've started to do that, and I've noticed a difference. And then brain dumping. So something that I do in advance of a hard conversation is I make 2 columns on a pen and paper, and I put in story and I put in facts. And I write down all the story that I've created about this thing, which is all my emotional baggage. And then on the other side, I put in just what is. They said this, I said this. This happened at this time on this date, and that's it, right? And now just go with the facts when it's time for the conversation. Taking the emotional factor out of it allows the communication to be more clear, direct, and honest. So those are the biggies that I would say.
But how to take emotional component? You thought about writing facts, but still, even some people, like if you say somebody like this clothes is white, some people can see it is like bluish white. Some people will see it as a greenish white. How to turn your emotions off?
Well, as it turns out, you're talking to someone who's just learning that they have emotions at all. So I don't know if I'm the best one for that. Truly didn't realize how almost so grounded and stoic I'd been leading my life in my ability to just keep it right here all the time. I'm just now being like, oh, I can get angry. How exciting and new. But of course, I'm usually the only person in my situations where that's the case. So what I have found is a few different things. One, the stories versus facts is really helpful. I mean, it sounds super simple and easy, but oftentimes the simplest, easiest things are really all that needs to be done. It's small tweaks. Being conscious of your volume. So especially in high tense moments, people will tend to mirror each other. So you know what I'm saying? You've been in this, I'm sure, before. Like if you're with your partner and you're annoyed, and you start to kind of hit a 6 level because now they're not hearing you, they're not understanding what you're saying, and you're trying to get your point across, and and they're coming at you the same, but just a tick higher. And so what would happen if you were super present and conscious during your conversation where you kept it like a 5? You were still impactful with your words and what you were saying. You were practicing pausing, breathing, and listening. I'm not saying that that's easy. It's simple, but it is not easy. And it certainly takes a ton of practice, and both parties need to be involved in the practice, right? And it's not always going to work. And you're going to have 2 steps back, and then 5 steps forward, and then 10 steps back, right? I totally get that. And I am seeing the fruits of this kind of labor, which is super internal and is the work of unlearning a lot of ways we have been at the whims of our dysregulation of emotion. So being able to be conscious and present as best you can muster, noticing your volume, noticing when mirroring is occurring. Are you mirroring the person you're speaking to? Are they being aggressive, combative, a little volatile? Are you doing the same thing? Now both people look like they're in threat, right? It just cascades like dominoes right on top of each other.
Yeah.
So really it's about you get to be who you want to see in the world.
It's hard.
Hell yeah. Yes, that's true too.
From your experience, if somebody expects to have a difficult conversation with a client, a partner, children, parents, whatever, but does their best to avoid having it, what is the first step to finally having it, and how to prepare for it?
Okay. So I'm going to answer that question. And I'm also going to say that as we were talking, I had additional skills that came to mind for the preceding question. So I'm going to add them anyway. And then I'm going to answer that question. But active listening, lessening your ego, not a skill, but just a practice. Honestly, improv. Literally go to improv class. And being able to ask powerful questions. You know, what if we lean into curiosity instead of anything else? Like blame. Okay. Those are those ones that came and I had to shoot them out or they would be gone. In terms of how I would go into the preparation, yes, I named some of them already. I would definitely do my columns, story versus fact. I would do that actually immediately when I'm starting to feel like, ooh, I think I'm going to have this conversation. Or if I'm aware that someone wants that with me, I'm writing it down. And I need to give it a few days, 2-3 days before we actually have the conversation. This needs to be in prep to let it sit and simmer. Mm-hmm. And then giving that other person a preface, if it's me, the one that's initiating this conversation. So, hey, do you think you'll have time, maybe 20, 25 minutes next week to talk about that thing that happened? I'd like to revisit it and just like review it with you as though it's a collaborative partnership. Try, right? Like these are all ideals. I might also just like right before the conversation or whatever, brain dump, get everything that's in my head out because there's probably some lingering emotion. So just like out, and then see what the fuck happens. I mean, right, there are several frameworks. I have a masterclass and a workshop that I teach that shares 3 different types of frameworks to have hard conversations as well. But overall, it's like, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me and have this honest conversation. You're really important to me. You're my boss and I want to do well. You're my partner and whatever, like noting their importance. And now it's feedback time. Honestly, no more than 3 pieces of feedback. And keep them clear, concise, direct, fact-based, no emotion. You always do this. You should have done this. None of that. You know, when you said these words, it impacted me like this. Mm-hmm. That's just what it is, right? Like I'm valid in whatever I'm saying there. Now the invitation, what are you hearing from what I'm saying? What's landing for you? Do you have anything that you want to add? Am I seeing this crazy? Like, where are we at? And then at that point, it's really important, give a request. Next time this happens, I'm not going to wait this long to have a conversation. Is it okay with you if we have that conversation in the moment or the next day? What do you think about that? Does that work for you? Thanks again for being able to have this conversation. I really appreciate it. It was not easy. This was kind of hard, but I'm glad we did it. So tons of gratitude in there, tons of, I'm inviting you in, I'm going to go in. I think I have found that kind of loose process to work best.
From your experience, what is the worst case scenario of such a conversation?
From my experience, when I was leading a group of digital nomads around the world for a year, there's 50 of them and me and my work wife. And I was one of the very small amount of brown people in the group, and especially one of the even smaller amount of brown people that were working for this company at the time. And an unfortunate attack happened when we were in Lisbon at a nightclub in the wee hours of the morning. Alcohol was involved. Bouncers were involved. I wasn't there. It was hard to know what was real and what wasn't, what was perceived and what wasn't. Tons of historical trauma. Portugal was the last country to decolonize, right? There's tons of history there that's going on. And my group was up in arms and they wanted a town hall. And it was my second month. And like the entire head of the company, all the people in the company were in Lisbon in the same month. So they also were going to be in attendance and asked me to lead the town hall, like not anybody else. I felt underprepared, uncertain, didn't have the answers. I didn't have anything that I needed to feel like I could have been set up for success. But to be quite frank, like in retrospect, there's really no way I think there could have been more that was given to me to set me up for such a raw, super difficult conversation facing literally 70 people in the room, some of which were Black Portuguese people. And it was easily the hardest thing that I'd ever done. And I went into it thinking people are going to leave the program. I'm going to get fired. I'm not Black enough to have this conversation. What do I know? Oh, I mean, the whole thing. And there was nobody really that I could ask for help. None of those things happened. There were some rumblings afterwards from the group of like general dis-ease, right? Like they were unhappy that this company is not gonna do it all and shutter the doors of this nightclub. But we weren't in America. Nobody gave a frig. And like there's only so much you can do. But the following months were difficult. We did have to do some work together as a group to come back to cohesion and trust. Trust had been lost.
Yeah. Got it.
I wanted to illustrate something, so that was why I chose the story route.
Yeah, it's a really vivid illustration, and thank you very much for sharing that. And Viki, I really wish to have the sky is the limit, but time is the limit. So the final question, what is your favorite food?
My favorite food is chicken korma, medium spice, Indian cuisine, my absolute favorite cuisine ever.
Got it. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experience, Viki. And it's been such a pleasure to hear and learn from you.
Thanks, Yuri.
And thank you so much for listening. If you like the show, hit the like button, 5 stars, and share it with your friends. That's it. We're done. See you in the next episode.